A German shepherd that was on the loose wouldn't stop, barking at a rubbish heap when individuals. Upon careful inspection, they discovered something unimaginable. The wind sliced through, slicing morning air against Henry's jacket's flannel collar as he headed along the well-known dirt trail, meandering through Milltown's outskirts. Henry, who was 68, liked the quiet of early mornings when everything had. His boots crunched and he hadn't stirred yet. Gently across the leaves that are covered in ice, and he exhaled slowly and visibly. The retired military veteran's puffs had strolled down this path each morning for. It has been almost 15 years since he relocated to this peaceful outskirts of the city following his. When his wife went away, he felt maintain a peaceful routine in a life that no longer produced a lot of noise, but that the calm of the morning was broken by a sharp. There was frenetic barking all over the trees are unlike anything else in their urgency and tenacity. Prior to this, Henry had heard from the location of an ancient, overgrown landfill. Location right off the path, a location that most people stayed away as the barking got louder. There's something about it that's quicker and more frantic. Caused the back of his neck to stand on end. He stood up, looking at was it a dog or a coyote in trouble? His curiosity drove him to move onward as he moved through the sparse undergrowth and reached the clearing's edge. The scene in front of him made him freeze. The dirty ribs of a German shepherd peeking out from under matted fur eyes. However, piercing was in some ways circling a big trash pile that never stops barking. Didn't even stop when it saw Henry. Rather than acting aggressively, the dog exuded a concentrated haste, flitting between Henry and the garbage heap before returning. Louder barking, as though pleading with him too. Henry's follow-up revealed enough in his ears to determine when something was incorrect. "Easy, boy," he mumbled warily. As they approached, the dog backed away a little, but it remained close. A stack of damaged, crumpled, and old boxes. Furniture with stiff eyes and a tight tail. Latched onto Henry using an odd intelligence. Something was unquestionably. He was kneeling next to the mess, pushing. Set aside a ripped blanket and an old piece of cardboard. He heard it softly in the box, so he believed it might have been his soft. Initially a whimper, not from the imagination. A dog, but from a weaker, smaller. His heart raced as he ripped farther into the pile, discarding wood and plastic. His hands then froze there, tucked in between. A ripped towel, half of which was covered by a infant with a wet coat, was a real human. The baby's lips were a little pale blue, and it shuddered wildly in the chill of the morning air seized Henry's breath. For a minute, the world was in his throat. No trees, no wind, nothing remained around him, barking only the brittle existence in his arms, and the dog is now seated next to him, silent for the first time when viewing. Henry's hands shook as he struggled to his phone while holding the infant in one arm. So, it was small and delicate, weighing very little. Anything he dialed fast. 911, his tone strained and urgent as he shouted over the phone to communicate their whereabouts. The dog is now barking and circling him once. Additionally, a baby is left freezing. Yes, by Oakage Trail, close to the former dump. He gasped in haste without considering Henry. Off his bulky coat and wrapped it securely, cocooning the youngster. In layers of warmth, the newborn infant. Its eyes twitched, yet it sobbed softly. Henry, still holding on to life, knelt down, protecting it from the fierce wind while he, as the German shepherd approached, almost slowly, carefully at first, then without triggering it, wrapped its slender, soiled body around the infant, putting pressure on the bundle of coat, its flesh, its breathing, its tranquility. Henry's eyes were closed, and the dog was stunned, was not attempting to intervene or seize control. Minutes went by while it attempted to assist. Henry continued to look down at the infant, then looks at the dog's body, shivered from the cold, but remained motionless. Away when the sirens sound eventually. Henry stood up and gestured to break the stillness. The ambulance frantically skittered to a stop at the paramedic station and the trailhead, ran this way over in their direction. "Right here," Henry answered, "Not me," and nodded, silently gazing down at the guide him. The youngster was hurried inside. The ambulance where oxygen, warmth, and one medic remained after skilled hands took control. Behind to talk to Henry, accompanied by a Henry and 2 police officers on their way, described all he had observed in the barking in response to the dog's demand that it had attempted to direct him to the officers exchanged disbelieving glances. "You claim that something was salvaged by a stray dog?" Baby one asked. "I'm being honest with you." "Stay steady. That dog," Henry said, "not only located her, but also kept her warm. Animal control quickly saved her life." Came up to the shepherd, carefully using poles and gloves, yet the dog simply gazed without growling. Henry's low body language and tail are unclear. They succeeded in persuading it to take a conveyance, cage containing food, but it paused until Henry nodded softly and muttered, "It's all right, you did well, boy." At the local, the dog was evaluated at the rescue shelter, but collar without a microchip, probably left behind. Weeks ago, the staff made an effort to show concern for him, but he disregarded everything and refused to eat. He spent every moment with the other dogs, glaring at the exit and recoiling at each sound, obviously anticipating something. Or a few days later, Henry came back too. As soon as the shepherd noticed, check on him. It stood up and twitched its tail at him. Cautious optimism when the pen was unlocked, the dog fled, refusing to flee, but it went right into Henry's legs, pushed its head against his knees, whining softly and trembling like a child. Reunited with a parent at last, the crew, Henry knelt as they stood in startled stillness, putting a gentle hand on the dog's head. "I suppose you choose me," he whispered. When they attempted to return the dog to, it refused to dig in its kennel. The leashes tugged by paws till it, slipping free, it returned directly to. Once more, Henry pressed in as though pleading, to avoid being abandoned, Henry's eyes watering. "I can't leave," I said, looking up at the crew. He added with a cracked voice, "He's here. Save a life already. Perhaps it's time someone preserves his." As soon as it was evident when Henry brought the dog home, recognized this animal was not your typical one. He called them brave due to the fact that from the first step they took together outside, the dog never left his side in the shelter, followed him so closely that it seemed as though he had joined Henry's own courageous self. Seems to comprehend that he wasn't picked by this elderly man, not out of sympathy, but for some reason, deeper understanding, possibly too injured. Too much time spent in silence, both spirits alone, deciding to share the days they spent together. Left after a difficult and courageous first week, recoiled from abrupt motions and refused to. Slept indoors and let out a bark while he slept. Nightmare haunted, yet Henry was. He put a cozy blanket in the patient's, prepared rice in the living room's corner, and chicken for him, and they sat close to one another, whistling vintage war tunes at night until as the dog gradually relaxed, Brave started to trust. By week 2, Brave had improved. Way his matted, lifeless fur began to shine. He took his hand. His name was answered by signals, and discover that walking without a leash is never, wandering far and constantly returning as though to inquire, "Am I doing okay?" Henry would nod slightly, grin, and Brave would proudly wag their tail for. Henry laughed for the first time in a long time. He discovered that he was waking up with greater vitality and a desire to go outside to bravely traverse the trails to kind neighbors who paused to admire. The shepherd, suddenly full of life, was trotting next to. They would ask him if he were the hero dog. Henry used to smile. "That's brave of you to have saved an elderly man's life," and children would pet the heart during the process. He and Brave used to be bashful and jittery, gently leaned into their hands. He was now the unofficial wagging. The neighborhood's mascot is the dog that. Discover a miracle one when barking at rubbish. Henry spent a calm afternoon sitting in his, flipping a warm mug of tea while relaxing. Via television networks, when a local news. He was drawn to the infant story, discovered deserted last month next to the Oak Ridge Trail, is completely recovered and has been taken in by a caring household. Physicians claim it was a miracle that she endured the chilly. Henry gazed at the screen, his straining chest with, in between astonishment and pride. Looked down at Brave, who was curled up at his. "You did that," Henry remarked quietly. Brave's ears pricked up. "You saved a lot of vitality." The space seemed alive with something imperceptible but strong hope. Perhaps for healing, but serenity is rarely permanent. Forever, a night of intense rain pelted. Thunder rolled in opposition to the windows. The wind and seas whistled beneath the doors. Henry was fast asleep when there came a piercing bark. He was startled awake by a louder bark. Brave was waiting urgently at the bedroom door, eyes wide, tail straight, and barking at the house's front. "What is it, boy?" Henry swung his head. Brave did not remove his legs from the bed. "But, hold on." He ran down the hall, barking. Henry feverishly followed his heart, hammering through the streaked rain. Window, he noticed a movement. Someone or something is skulking along a shadowy figure crouched on the side of the house, low, heading for the rear entrance. Brave gave a deep, deadly snarl and lunged and scratched at the door, ready to protect Henry's hand. Snarling, someone was shaking on a light switch. Courageous and out there once astray. The only thing left was to be forgotten in the cold. Something separating his new house from something much riskier than loneliness. The rain became more intense, water sheets crashing against the windows while Henry heard thunder roaring overhead. Stood motionless in the corridor, his gaze trying to keep up with the courageous person creeping up the house's side. Barking, Brave was a whirl of movement. His body was stiff and prepared to growl. Brave ran without hesitation, paws sliding toward the back door. Throughout the wood floors as Henry Hart scratched at the doorknob. He ripped open the chest with a thud. Door, and Brave immediately leaped into. In the evening, the figure was shocked by the barking's abrupt entrance. Suddenly, he started to sprint through the yard, stumbling in and leaping over the fence. The muck, but Brave was propelled more quickly by something much more powerful than his instincts. Henry was pursued with unwavering resolve. Went outside in the rain, his clothes drenched, shouting, "Brave, return be careful." However, the dog had been swallowed. Minutes later, right before nightfall, fear gripped Henry as he heard a tire shrieked in the distance. Shouting reverberated through the red storm, and flashing blue lights ran between as two police cruisers arrived. Trees on the neighborhood's distant side. Henry hurried through the rain in his bare feet, grass with his heart in his throat. Brave stood in the street lamp's glow, with one paw growling and his teeth shone securely on a man's chest that was pinned to. The suspect's jacket was ripped on the ground. His face was covered in mud and a knife. Two officers are lying a few feet away. Approach with caution, weapons drawn. A policeman remarked, "It's okay, boy, as you got a good job," they said when they moved in. Brave didn't retreat until Henry, gently calling him. The shepherd trotted, drenched and trembling at his side, yet his eyes proud and on guard. When the officers placed handcuffs on, one of the men turned to Henry. "Henry, you are aware of what you have there?" Blinking, bewildered, a dog that had just saved. The officer nodded, and suddenly there were 3 states are looking for that individual. Been spending weeks hiding out here. He has been involved in thefts and break-ins. It appears that he chose the casing homes. Incorrect one tonight, and word quickly spread by local news vans dotted the peaceful morning. Henry's door was knocked on by street reporters, requesting to meet the valiant German, a shepherd who had apprehended an offender in. Pictures of Brave sitting on his tracks, peacefully with his damp fur next to Henry, his eyes gleaming and brushing made the The town paper's top page the following: "A day rescue dog becomes a rescuer once more. Kids stopped by to deliver handmade. The fire department brought him some snacks. A crimson bandana and a unique badge with gold-stitched hero at his subsequent examination. The town's veterinarian shook his head in. You are aware that I have experience working with dogs for 30 years, but this one's distinct, devoted, intelligent, fearless, and after every experience he's had is amazing." Henry then glanced at Brave, who rested calmly with one ear at his feet, flicking in response to the veterinarians, saying, "I thought I was saving him." In a quiet voice, Henry stated at him, his eyes in an interview with the local news become hazy. "I genuinely thought so, but in actuality, it was he who saved me," as well as the camera capturing. The two are seated next to one elderly person, devoted to both surviving. It was evident to anyone observing the relationship between there was something much more potent than them. Rather than inevitability, love was earned, and one act of life-saving at a time. The seasons progressed steadily, and Brave and Henry's lives settled into a calm, well-worn cadence every morning. Started with their peaceful stroll along the same old path that fate had originally brought them together, and every night concluded similarly, with courageous curling at Henry's feet near the hearth. The sound of wood crackling filled the quiet. Their relationship only deepened, stronger over time as a friendship developed. Not only out of habit, but also to cure. Henry was reticent and plagued by loneliness. Now laughed more and smiled more readily, frequently and bravely after being scared and broken, had developed into a constant, soothing presence that, not only for Henry, but also for other people. They went to the town's every Thursday kids' facility where Brave had swiftly won the kids' affection as a guest. Many of them are struggling too much, because their little shoulders illuminated the instant Brave entered the room in. They would use his tiny blue treatment vest, read to him while you sit in circles against his muscular body as though he were the brave teddy bear who is always alive and breathing. Listen without flinching or barking. Calm patient with a gentle heartbeat in He doesn't speak in a noisy world, yet he comprehends, a youngster murmured, and everyone thought it was real. Henry frequently sat close by with his hands folded in his lap, observing everything in silent awe. Occasionally, when no one was around, would thank the dog in a whisper. "Thank you for saving more." Next to him, more than a single life. Henry wrote a letter as the years went by, something that he stored in a drawer with clean handwriting, just in case. If this note is discovered after, please look after Brave. He is brave. I'm leaving. He is family, not just a dog, and he rescued I aspire to live more times than I can count. The remainder of his days are spent with someone who shares my affection for him, since he is deserving of nothing less than. Brave lived a long time, but fate had different intentions, longer than anticipated, despite the fact that his stride decreased and his muzzle turned gray. He stayed by Henry's side faithfully. Brave lay on the porch as Henry slept. Henry was sitting in his rocking chair when Brave would lay his head down to read at night, never more than on the elderly man's slipper, a few feet apart, always observing, close by, and when the moment eventually arrived when the home became more silent and the porch didn't, Brave, the longer creaked beneath Henry's boots, remained and moved a bit more slowly, lingered at the door a bit longer as though he is still waiting for his pal to speak. However, their acquaintances, said the bond, never revealed their story, which went beyond. Visitors from the town came only to observe the seat positioned behind the ancient oak on the path where a little sign said, "In Henry's dignity and the bravery of two hearts one soul." People occasionally sat in, quiet, occasionally accompanied by their own dogs, considering the significance of being saved, and to save in exchange, hence the myth of an elderly man who is lonely and a stray dog, survived as more than just a rescue story, but more as a silent, persistent warning that, true, unconditional love is possible. Change when you least expect it to. Everything if this tale resonated with you. Hard in the same way that Brave touched people's lives. We welcome you to join the group of people he met. Us for more courageous real-life stories. Devotion and the enduring connection between. There are innumerable people and animals there. Brave and other unsung heroes. Waiting to be loved and found. Perhaps to save someone else in exchange. Sign up for amazing paw stories too. Never pass on a nice, hopeful moment. Motivation, since occasionally the deepest paw prints are left by the smallest. Inscriptions on our hearts we are grateful for. Observing and keeping in mind each act of being kind causes a ripple. So be that ripple.